right, thank you. Welcome to Shiloh National Military Park. My name is Matt, and for the next 25 to 35 to maybe an hour, depending upon your faces, we're going to talk about how it felt to be an infantryman in 1862. Good times, right? So let me ask you all this. Who likes to take long walks in the sun?
Me?
No infantrymen are here. Okay. Before we get into this, though, let's go over some safety real quick. How many like ticks out there? Anybody? I've had a guy go, I love them. Okay, if you're like me and you don't like ticks, be careful because they're really bad this year. Keep checking yourselves constantly, okay? Also, it's warm. Thank you, Captain Obvious, I know. It is very warm out. Make sure you're drinking water, and if you have to cough or sneeze, do it in your elbow. Somebody was telling me to do it in my armpit the other day, and I just can't figure that one out. That hurt. Anyway, so that's safety, and stay on that side of the yellow rope. Other than that, let's go ahead and start the program. So, how was it to be recruited in 1862? Completely different than how it is today. If you enlist today, it's a courtship between you and your recruiter. They're going to spend a couple of months with you, take you out to dinner a couple of times. I know it's McDonald's, but hey, they're on a shoestring budget. You might get a couple of cups of coffee out of them. Eventually, you're finally going to sign that contract. So they'll take you to the MEP Center that night. You'll take the Armed Forces Vocational Aptitude Battery, which is the ASVAB, big fancy word for a test. That test will tell you what you can and can't do in whatever branch you want to enlist in. Next morning they wake you up, they feed you breakfast, and you spend all day going through a very strenuous physical. And at the very end, around 3 or 4 o'clock in the evening, you raise your right hand and you belong to the United States government. Very long process, but it wasn't like that in 1862. Now what I'm about to tell y'all is going to apply for the North as well as the South. But we're going to fixate on the North because I'm wearing a blue uniform. Now with your permission, I'm going to use my home of record. I come from a big farming community. Yeah, I said that with a straight face. In Richland County, Illinois. Our county seat was Olney. Has anybody heard of Olney, Illinois? Home of the white squirrel. That's what they're famous for. Yeah, I know. That's all I got. Anyway, so we're going to use that as our home of record, our example today. So how I would find out about this is probably word of mouth. There's going to be a recruiting meeting on this day, and you must be there. Now back then it was very important to be manly. So if that didn't work, they were like, it's going to be your manly duty to be there. Uh-oh. Okay. And if that didn't work, they would go for the ultimate. It's your Christian manly duty. Okay, you are guilted into it now. You're going to be there. But let's face it, we're talking about farmers. So they probably didn't need that much prodding to go because you're going to spend the rest of your life on this small piece of property farming. But this is an opportunity for adventure. Well, the day of the recruiting meeting, I would show up in Olney, Illinois, and all of the ladies would be there in their finest dresses. The men would be dressed as best they could too. Remember, we're dealing with farmers. There'd be a captain there and a sergeant or a corporal in their impeccable uniforms. And they would all begin to tell us, it's our manly duty to fight this war. You must fight this war. They'd whip you up into a patriotic fervor. And right there was the county doctor. Why wait? Now, the level of physical that you're going to get is going to vary from place to place. If you were to enlist in Richmond, Virginia, or Chicago, Illinois, they would make you disrobe. They'd tap on your chest, make you do exercises to make sure that you were qualified to be in the Army. Not in Richland County, though. You got 2 arms and 2 legs. They look about the same length. Can you see it? Out of one eye? Okay. Have you got 4 teeth? 2 top, 2 bottom, and do they touch? Splendid! You're in the Army! They had to touch. You had to have top and bottom so you could eat your rations. It's not like you could look over at your buddy and go, well, you chew this hardtack for me. That's not going to happen. Once they did that, they put us all in formation, and they'd march you around the town square, and everybody would cheer, hurrah! But they weren't really marching because they didn't know how to march. It was more of a controlled mob. Then they would stop, and one at a time, each one of those young men would walk up and sign their name on the company roster. That's if they could read or write. Was it important for farmers in 1862 to read and write? Can I put the crops out? Can I take care of them? Can I bring them in on time? Can I take care of my family? That's all that's important. You're absolutely right. As an example, one North Carolina company of 107 volunteers, 77 men had to make their mark because they couldn't read or write. But This is north and south. And after they did that, everybody was given the good news. The captain stood up and said, "We have formed a company." And everybody was like, "Yay!" Then he said, "It takes 10 companies to form a regiment." Uh-oh. So they had the inept pleasure of walking from Alny, Illinois, all the way to Springfield, where they would be link up with their other 9 companies and form the 8th Illinois Regiment, Company D. Only 100 miles, not bad. And now we can finally begin training, can't we? No, you're not going to train in Springfield. They're going to make you walk all the way to Cairo, Illinois. 80 miles. Hey, by the time those young men made it there, they were pretty limber on their feet. They definitely had the walking down. That's where they're going to begin training. The 8th Illinois received 2 weeks of basic training. Anybody know what the shortest basic training is today?
2 months.
We got one for 2 months. It's close. 6 weeks. And these guys are getting 2 weeks. Do you think that's bad? Okay. You see the battery that's over there next to the cemetery? That's Silver Spar's battery. On the morning of April the 6th, they manhandled their guns up into position off of Pittsburgh Landing. They didn't have any horses. This battery is comprised mainly of German immigrants, so their English wasn't the best. And after they got their guns into position, Colonel Webster, the man who was forming Grant's last line, taught them how to fire their guns. They hadn't fired them before. On-the-job training, right? But if you read Silver Spar's report, he was an honest man. He said, "We lobbed rounds in the general direction of the enemy." A truer statement could not be made. So 2 weeks isn't too bad. 2 weeks to teach me my left foot from my right, because once again, that's not important, is it? But they're going to introduce you to military discipline. Now, to say these young men were as disciplined as today, I don't know. If an officer today tells you to go take that hill, you go take that hill, don't you? In 1862, if an officer who was elected from your men walked up and said, "I need you to go charge that cannon," they were like, "Right behind you, sir. You lead the way." You ever wondered why the casualty rates for officers and non-commissioned officers in the Civil War were so high? That's why. And it's not because they were cowards, and it's not because they were undisciplined. I would like to think that these young men brought common sense with them, and they knew that will hurt. Now, let's go over my uniform, because I'm also going to get my uniform issued to me. Stay. Okay. What do you think of my hat?
It's fancy.
Isn't it dapper? I like to walk around Savannah with it at night. It's always nice to tip my hat to people. This is the dress pattern 1852, also known as the Hardy hat. But the Hardy hat is not really what they call it. Looks nice though, but after a while, you're going to lose the beautiful plume. There it is. Hello. The blue cord's going to fall off. All the brass will disappear. It's going to get rained on. You're going to sweat in it. And eventually, it's going to start to get comfortable. Because right now, it's really not that comfortable. But it gives you a good shade, doesn't it? The other alternative was this thing. Made of blue wool. Got a hard board in the top of it. And look at the size of that brim. That's going to really keep the sun off, isn't it? Not really. Nice thing about this, cheap to make. And when you're walking through an orchard, you got a basket. The forage hat. The coat that I'm wearing is a special coat. It is called a state pattern. Illinois contracted with the state of New York to make them. This is one of the options that they would have had. The other option in the early war was this, called the frock coat. What do you think? Is that not a giant waste of wool? They didn't last very long. Eventually, when the war kept dragging on, they're going to go to this coat called the sack coat. It's called a sack because it kind of hangs on you like a sack. It's only held together with 4 buttons, and it got a collar on it. Cheap to make. But this war is going to be expensive. All dyed with indigo blue, 18-ounce wool. Nice and comfortable. My trousers are also dyed with indigo blue, and they're 20 ounces of wool. I know what you're thinking. You're like, that can't be the same color. Well, what happened was when the North realized that this war was not going to be over in 90 days, they needed to figure out how to make the money stretch. So they cut the dye batch in half for the pants, and presto, we've got sky blue. It works. Can you imagine if the colors were reversed? That'd be a nightmare. Are we done with wool? No, you're absolutely right. We're going to wear wool socks. We really want these soldiers to be comfortable. And the shoes that I'm wearing are military brogans. Aren't they stylish? They're not too bad as far as comfort is concerned. And if you know somebody in the artillery or the cavalry, you can get pieces of metal shaped like horseshoes, and you can put them back here on your heels. And you can get little nails to put in the front, called hobnails. Now, did this add to the comfort? No. But it made it last so much longer. And if you have a choice between wearing these, walking through all this stuff, or going barefoot, shoes are going to win. Now, the last thing I have is my shirt. Now, this is an issue shirt made of cotton. I know what you're thinking, sir. You're like, cotton was king back then. Why didn't they just make the entire uniform out of cotton? It makes sense, right? A lot more comfortable, also a lot more flammable. And that thing has flame. This won't catch on fire nearly as easy. So wool's not too bad. My equipment, I have a canteen made of tin. Now you could have wood ones or tin ones, but the soldiers preferred the tin ones. Not because they won't leak, because everything's going to leak eventually. They would unstitch the jean cloth, pull this thing out, and throw it on the fire. After a few minutes, that seal would be nice and hot, and you'd pop it in two. Now I got two canteen halves. What can you do with a canteen half? Put a piece of wood on it, you got a skillet. When you get done cooking your food, you put it in your lap. Now you got a plate. You have a skillet plate. And even better, you might have something I want to trade. I seen you picked up a potato. How about a half potato for a skillet plate? You're like, man, I'm on it. The bartering system is alive and well. Next is this. No, it is not my purse. It is not a merce either. Control yourselves. This is my haversack. It is made of white cotton. The black is a tar coating or a paint that's on it to make it somewhat water resistant. And inside, you know what I carry inside this? My dirty socks. You ready to see them? All right. I'm just messing with you. You're right. Someone said food over here. This is my Sanitation Commission poke sack. You know why they call it a poke sack? Think this is the Army. We keep things simple.
Because you poke it.
You poke stuff in it, exactly. There's no complications here. And this week, the National Park Service has given me beef jerky again. One of these days, they'll give me bacon. But hey, we'll deal with beef jerky. In here, I've got all my daily bean ration. About 1.5 ounces. And I got some rice in this one. About 1.5 ounces. Who likes coffee? Come on.
Yeah, definitely.
Quit trying to deny it. I can't get out of bed without 5 cups. That's why I'm wired all the time. We can thank the Civil War for getting us all addicted to this stuff. Good stuff though. Comes in a bean form. Sometimes green. If it's green, you have to roast it yourself. One more sniff. What else we got in here? Ooh, hardtack. This isn't too bad. It's actually somewhat fresh. But if you ever read the book Hardtack and Coffee by Billings, he will tell you that this stuff you could probably drive a tent stake in with. Soldier's going to get 10 of these a day to live on. When it arrived at the front, it came in a wooden crate that was marked BC, that stood for Brigade Commissary. But if any of y'all know soldiers, you realize their sense of humor is a little on the weird side. And eventually that BC stood for, this stuff was baked before Christ, and the reason why it's so hard is it's just now getting to the battlefield. Aha! I found this the other day. An onion. I know what you're thinking. This is a Confederate onion. I can't eat it. Well, I tell you what, it took the oath. I can eat it now. It's back in the Union.
Good job.
I don't have a skillet plate yet. I'm just stuck with a regular plate. And this thing. I know it's fancy. On the inside, there's a big old piece of leather. That's to keep my fork from putting a hole in my haversack. You don't want a hole in your haversack. Then you'll have soggy food. And that's my haversack. All right, I just wanted to make sure. The bayonet. How many of us have heard of the harrowing gallant charges of the bayonet in the Civil War? Unfortunately, they were very few and far between. Now, the American soldier has to carry everything on his back, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to carry this thing if I'm not going to use it? No. And that's not just the Civil War. My grandfather fought with the 2nd Infantry Division all the way across Europe. And he used to love telling stories about whenever the unit in front of him got issued something new that they didn't need. It was usually gas masks. Because you'd be walking along and like, oh, hey, look, Company D just got the new gas masks. Because they were everywhere, because they weren't going to carry them. The American soldier is not going to use something, it's not getting toted. So why would I still carry this thing? How else am I going to grind my coffee? It's not like I got a coffee grinder on me. If I have to dig in, I could break up the dirt with this. And one of my favorite uses after a long day, get my bivouac all set up, poke it in the ground, put a candle on the end of it. It's a soldier nightlight. Just in case they might still be afraid of the dark. My cap pouch. Inside this I have my percussion caps. This is a very useful thing because it has the necessary ingredient to ignite the black powder in the muzzle and have that controlled explosion that will shove the round out. And last but not least, I have my cartridge box. The 13th Infantry Regiment to this day has a cartridge box much like this on its regimental crests. And one of their mottos is 40 rounds. Anybody want to guess why they say 40 rounds? What's that, ma'am?
Did you only get 40 rounds?
That's all this thing will carry. Yes! Keep that up, you'll be a general. In the top, you'll have 10 rounds that are loose. And in the bottom, a package. Each one of these cartridge boxes have 2 of these. 20 times 2 is 40 rounds. Now, brand new soldiers would make sure they went into combat with 40 rounds. Veterans, no. 40 rounds doesn't last very long. So they would be shoving extra rounds in their hat, tuck their pants into their socks and shove it down their pants, in their pockets, wherever they could put extra ammunition. So that's all I need to be an infantryman, right? I'm ready to go? No, I'm kind of missing that thing, aren't I? That was your cue. You're supposed to come to me. Fine. May I introduce to you the Enfield rifled musket. Fires a .577 round. Imported from England. It's nice and light. It's only 9.5 pounds. And it's not too tall. It's only 55 inches. If you're a shorter soldier and you get this thing issued to you, the Army says, don't worry, you'll grow into it. Let's talk about accuracy. Do you think these things were very accurate? Before they could be sold to the United States or the Confederate States, they were fired at a range of 1,000 yards and they had to penetrate a piece of pine. That's about where the gates of the National Cemetery are today. Not what we got today, but that's still not too bad for 1862. So now, am I ready to be an infantryman? Yes, we can do this now. The best part, we get to fire it. Now, how they fired it is called load in 9 times. The command, load in 9 times, tells the soldier, you might want to wake up, we're about to do something. And then we have what we call the command of execution. And that is load, and that is, you better do something. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right over here, and I am going to go through the load in 9 times procedure and fire it. Then I'll come back and talk to you all. Okay? Now, I seen you iron my hardtack. Don't be eating that. That's all I got to eat today. Load in 9 times. Load. First step, the soldier's going to pick up the musket, rotate it, place it between his feet that are at a 45-degree angle. Notice where the muzzle is and where the ramrod is. He's going to take his left hand, grip it up high, take his right hand, and slap his cartridge box. Handle cartridge. Reach in and pull out a paper cartridge and bring it up to his teeth. Tear cartridge. Charge cartridge. Gonna dump the powder in, work the round in, push the wadding in, and pop his ramrod free. Draw rammer. Ram cartridge. Gonna get it all packed in there good and tight. Pull out the ramrod and start it on its long journey home. And place his pinky on the end of it. The reason why they're gonna place the pinky on the end of this is this might accidentally go off. And if that happens, I lose a pinky. Right? The Army says you got 4 more to go before we have to make you a cook. It's all good. Return rammer. Prime. This is the most complicated step. On the command of prime, soldier's going to lift the musket, rotate it, resting it on his cap pouch. He's going to take his right foot, driving it into his left to form a nice letter T, pull the hammer back 1 click, and put a new percussion cap on it. Ready. Hammer goes back a 2nd click. Aim. Now when I say fire, I say fire, so if you got delicate ears, go ahead and cover them. Fire. Recover arms and shoulder arms. So that's all there is to it. Pretty easy, right? Now, the manual of the day was written by a man named Hardy. They called it the Hardy's Manual. There was a problem with the Hardy's Manual. Well, Hardy joined the Confederacy. Now, no self-respecting Union man's going to use a Confederate book, so we needed our own book, didn't we? We contracted with a man named Casey who said, "Don't you worry, I'll write you a book and I'll do it fast." And he did. He took the Hardy's Manual, pulled Hardy's cover off and put his own on and said, "Here you go." Plagiarism is the highest form of flattery. So it's amazing they both agreed on just about everything through that whole book. One thing though was a good trained infantryman can fire 3 rounds a minute. Can I fire 3 rounds a minute? Not like that. Anybody familiar with the term classical conditioning or muscle memory? We still use it today, don't we? I enlisted in the Marines in 1985 and I was issued 2 canteens. One had a green cap, one had a black cap. The black cap allowed me to drink out of my gas mask. We always wore the black cap on our left hip. It's not because my gunnery sergeant was making a fashion statement. It's because all 189,000 Marines wore it on their left hip. The Marine Corps did not want us thinking where it was. They wanted us to react where it was. We still use it today and it's very effective. So now I'm going to go over and shoot it. We're going to try to speed it up a little bit. Keep in mind 3 things. 1, I'm not getting shot at. 2, I haven't really trained much with this. And last but not least, if I don't make 40 seconds, I'm not worried about it. The worst they'll do is send me back to Cairo, Illinois, where they have good restaurants. Okay?
Oh, nice. I bet I have.
Load! Yeah, I'm going back to Cairo, aren't I? Aim, fire, fire at will. Ceasefire. Recover arms and shoulder arms. You got an added bonus. You got to see me use the tool that I'm supposed to pull out to break my ramrod free. Wasn't that cool? No extra charge for that moment. So that's about all it was to be in the infantry in 1862. 95% of your time, a lot of walking and a lot of boredom. 5%, people trying to shoot at you. Today, would you all do me 2 favors? I'd appreciate it. Try not to refer to these men as boys or children. I guarantee the old adage, the first casualty of war is youth and innocence. I will tell you from experience, after the first exchange of fire, there were no children on this battlefield. Besides, the 20th Indiana had a 9-year-old on his ranks, and he was carrying one of these. He was not carrying a drum or a fife. The last thing, while you're out enjoying the park today, you're going to see all these beautiful monuments with generals' names on it and colonels' names. At the batteries, you'll see tablets with captains and lieutenants. What you will not see out there today is the names of those faceless farmers who actually fought this war. The only time you'll see their name on a piece of granite is in a cemetery. And if you walk through our national cemetery, you will realize that over 2/3 of those are unknown. So while you're out today reading about all these generals and other high-ranking officers, could you give those young men a moment? I would appreciate it. Enjoy your park.
Thank you.